Hi everyone, I hope you're okay. Welcome to another geography lesson. This is actually going to be our last lesson on the polar biomes, and we are again going to be looking at global warming and more importantly climate change and how this affects the polar biomes. And we're then going to see if there is anything that we can do or change in our daily lives to help slow down global warming and slow down the effects of climate change so that we can then protect the polar biomes. Even if we are thousands of miles away, we know we are doing our bit to protect that very important part of our Earth. So I have got some definitions here, and I have got some phrases here. So I've got global warming, climate change, and greenhouse gases. So what I'd like you to do is pause the video and then connect the definitions to the correct term, okay, to see how much you remembered from our last lesson. So if you want to pause the video now and have a go, then off you go and good luck. Okay, so hopefully you got on okay with that. So let's have a read through first. So we've got global warming. Okay, now I've had a read through all of these and I think it's this bottom one here. So the gradual heating of the Earth's surface caused by greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere. I'm going to get my pen and I'm going to draw a line. Now there was a bit of a clue because we had heating there, didn't we? And that kind of links to warming, so that was a little bit of a clue there. And global as well. We've got the Earth's atmosphere. Okay, so remember it's those harmful gases getting trapped into the Earth's atmosphere, which is causing the Earth to sort of stay warm, and it's harder for the atmosphere to release some of the sun's rays or for them to reflect back. So we've got climate change next. So I can see this one here. So I've got a long-term change in average weather patterns and temperatures locally and globally. I haven't put a full stop on the end of here. Let me just do that now. So I know that this links to climate change because global warming, we're talking about the Earth warming, and global warming affects the climate, so it causes them to change. They're two different things. You need to remember that they are two different things. And lastly, we've got greenhouse gases. And we've got gases that are harmful to the Earth's atmosphere. They include carbon dioxide, methane, and water vapour. So these are some of the gases that we looked at last week. And these are the gases that get trapped in the Earth's atmosphere and are causing it to feel warmer and temperatures to rise. Okay, so well done if you got all those right. Not to worry if you didn't, because that's why we went over it, just so we can recap and make sure that we know what is happening in this lesson. So the polar ice caps are melting, but let's take a look at what change has occurred over time. Again, I need to put a H in there. Oh dearie me. So I have found this useful tool that's actually from NASA. Let me see if I can make it bigger. And it shows what has happened to the Arctic ice caps over time. Make it bigger. So it's got the years here in the top left-hand corner. And this is the Arctic. We can see what's happening to the sea ice as time goes on. So off we go. Do you think there's more sea ice or do you think there's less? Let's have a look. So you can see the years are going on here. What do you notice about the ice? It's getting smaller, isn't it? So as the video says, NASA video shows how the Arctic sea ice has changed since the 1980s. So as you can see, there was so much more here, and then we've got 2016 here, and it's depleted. A lot has melted, and that is likely to be due to global warming. So let's continue. It's losing its defensive wall against warming summers. So remember what we said last week about how the warm seasons appear to be getting longer. So the first major loss of ice was in 1984. You can see we're moving through the years up here. So it's interesting to see just how much the ice has melted over, you know, that number of years. So when it was so 1984, that's almost 30 years ago, and it's melted over that amount of time. So it makes you think, I wonder what it could be like in another 30 years' time. And there's some further pictures here for you to just give you an idea of that as well. So yeah, I wonder what it would be like if we continue as we are going with sort of greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere. What is it going to be like in 30 years' time? So I've just moved myself down here. I've actually included some videos on the home learning wider curriculum sheet, because there's some that you might want to explore. You might also want to explore the websites, but I didn't want this lesson to just be videos. I thought I'd talk a bit and then you can go off and have a look at those videos. So any of the videos that are here, I have linked them in there. So what are the consequences of this sea ice melting? What problems do we face? We know that last time we said that polar bears were struggling, but also indigenous people, and the sea levels were rising. So as it says here, global warming is happening at an unnatural rate. So it means that ice and glaciers are melting faster than they can be replenished, so faster than they can be restored and refreeze. So if they're unable to refreeze, it means that those consequences, they're irreversible, it can't be changed. So as we said before, the sea levels are going to be rising, and it means that because there is more, let's say, water in the ocean, currents are going to be disrupted, and that will also disrupt weather patterns, because as we know from the water cycle, that is how our weather is influenced. And it also might affect people who fish for a living, because what is happening with some fish is because it's getting warmer, the fish are thinking, gosh, it's getting far too warm here, we need to go to a colder place so that we can survive. So they're actually moving to the polar ice cap. So that is having an effect on people's livelihoods, particularly people who fish. And we can also see here that coastal communities face disaster. So we've spoken about flooding and extreme weather, and how particularly coastal places are affected by this. And that is because of the sea levels rising, it's more likely to flood, isn't it? And also in the Arctic, wildlife like walrus and polar bears are losing their homes, spending more time on land. And this has meant that there's actually been more contact between polar bears and that wildlife with people, because they're looking for food, because there's a serious lack of food because of these warmer summer months. So polar bears are having to sort of go into communities, and that is affecting people because it's also putting them at risk, but polar bears as well, because people are likely to sort of try and get rid of the polar bears if they're faced with one. I mean, if a polar bear came into Bristol, I'm not quite sure what people would do. But it's not safe for both of them, so that is causing some problems there as well. So we've got pictures of sort of a coastal town. You can see a ship here. It looks almost like a harbour, doesn't it, here? And we've got some serious flooding going on. And then also you can see this polar bear here who doesn't have much ice to stand on. Again, if you wanted to find out more, those videos are, there's some very good videos that I've selected and websites, so you can go and have a look at some more pictures if you would like to. So we're going on to sort of the second half of our lesson. So how can we help slow down climate change? So what changes can we make to, let's say, stop or prevent some of those nasty gases? So methane, water vapour and carbon dioxide. How can we prevent some of those nasty gases going into the atmosphere? Is there any way that we can change what we do to slow down or prevent the amount that is going into the atmosphere? So there's quite a lot of things that you can do. I've put a selection of things on here that will probably best apply to you guys, okay? There's some things such as drive your car less. Obviously, I know that none of you, well, I hope none of you are able to drive a car, but there's quite a few things that maybe don't apply, but these are some things that you can do. What you're going to do for your activity is you're going to be making a poster. So I want you to imagine that in Wheatfield, we are battling climate change. You want to imagine no one else in the school knows what climate change is. You could even imagine that the adults don't know what this is, okay? I want you to create a poster that is really eye-catching. It has lots of facts about global warming and climate change. You might also want to include some facts about the polar regions and how they are being affected and how that will affect us, okay? So I'll talk about a little bit more about that in a minute. But these are some of the things that you can do, you know, just at home to make sure that you are sort of saving the planet a little bit more. So when I say switch off, you can pause the video and have a little guess as to what I mean, but I'm going to write here what I mean by that. So you can turn off light switches when they're not being used. I'm just going to make a little list here, because if you've got a light that is on in your house but you're not actually using it, that is still burning up energy. So somewhere that is still burning energy that could be burning gas that is then going into the atmosphere, in simple terms. Switch off, so turn off. You could, well, conserve water, that probably goes here as well. So turn off the tap. So say, for example, you're brushing your teeth or you're filling your water bottle, but you've stopped to talk to someone. If you're not using that water, make sure that you've just turned off that tap so that you're conserving energy and you're also conserving water. So I might put turn off appliances when they are not used. So turning off, I'm just going to put turn off switches actually, if they're not being used, because you know sometimes you get the switch and it's got the sort of the red top in it to say whether it is on or off. Even if you don't have an appliance in it, make sure you turn it off because it's still using energy. So that is a really good way. Another way to conserve energy is to would be to perhaps, let's have a look, do activities that don't involve electricity. Terrible spelling there. Electricity. So this might mean that you might have a certain time of the day where you play on your iPad or you watch something on telly. Can you challenge yourself to maybe do something that doesn't involve using electricity, that is a little bit more green and doesn't involve any sort of burning of fuels? So you could read, you could colour, maybe go out for a walk, go out in your garden and play around for a little bit. So having a little bit of bit less screen time is also going to be helping you and helping the environment as well. Okay, so remember I said about the car earlier as well. Obviously, I know that none of you are going to be driving cars around, but cycling and walking when you can is also a really good way. It's also a really good way to avoid doing activities that are burning lots of energy. But it also means that if you're cycling and walking, you're not using transport that could be, you know, obviously they run off petrol and they're pumping nasty gases into the atmosphere, as well as polluting our environment. So any way you can cycle and walk is also a really good way to stay green. Another really good way of staying green is to recycle and reuse items. Okay, so so making sure that you're recycling plastic and cans and paper, because if not, that's just going to go straight into the landfill. But also if you're reusing those things, it's sort of stopping people from buying more and more, which would slow down people making those things, which slows down the gases, nasty gases going into the air. Because when those things are produced, fuels have to be burnt for those things to be produced. And I know that Year 4 are very good at bringing in their own water bottles. So reusable water bottles, and also giving or receiving toys or things that have previously been used by other people is also good. It's not something that we can really maybe do now because of COVID, but giving things to charity and also receiving things from other people is a really good way of making sure that you are reusing things and you're not sort of buying and throwing away, which is also really bad for the environment. Okay, so reusing toys or giving to charity. Might say charity shops, because that's another really good thing to do. And the same goes for sort of clothes as well, reusing clothes, because quite often it takes a lot of water and a lot of energy to make clothes, and this can also contribute to global warming again, because it's just quite harmful for the environment. You might think, how is this going to help the polar biomes? How is any of this going to stop the polar ice caps from melting? Well, if everybody did a few of these little steps each day, then it means that sort of less nasty gases would be pumped into the air and our carbon footprint would be lower. So that means that the impact that we have on the earth would be positive and green, which means hopefully that would then have an effect later on. So as long as we all take our part in doing these things, we can help slow down climate change, hopefully. So your challenge now is to create a poster. So as I said, I want you to imagine that this poster is going to be hung up in school. Now this poster here, do we think it's good? I think it's eye-catching. However, there's not really any facts on there at all. So I'm challenging you to include some facts on yours. So you might want to include, do these things to be more green, and you can help the polar ice caps. So think of ways that you can incorporate what you've learned about global warming and climate change into how being more green is positive for changing that. So have a little look. There's also some really useful websites I've posted that explain things in sort of a very simple, easy to understand way, and hopefully they can make your posters even better. But I can't wait to see what you come up with. So please make sure you send them to Miss Long and I when you are finished. I know we would really like to have a look. So take care and enjoy, and I'll see you soon. Bye.